Hello and welcome back to Invincible Asia. I'm George Clark and this is my podcast where I can blab on about Hong Kong movies, Asian cinema and everything I love about it. In this episode I'm going to be talking about director Lam Nai Choi, the wonderful Yuen Biao, upcoming releases from the usual distributors, and just wanted to recap on some of the upcoming Golden Princess titles under the Shout Factory Arrow Video banner, which is where I'm going to start. Okay, so in the run-up to the Shout Factory and Arrow Video's 4K releases of the Golden Princess catalogue, I just wanted to take a moment to talk about the titles they have and how they've been released over the previous years. It seems that for the last 15 years at least, films such as Hard Boiled, A Better Tomorrow, The Killer, A Chinese Ghost Story, etc, 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 have been held hostage for Western fans, whereas distribution labels in the East, let's say take Nova Media as an example, have been putting a lot of the Golden Princess titles out there on Blu-ray for some time. Now, the last time some of these films got released in the West was via the Dragon Dynasty label, but even that was 15 to 20 years ago, which is scarily crazy to think. So what just happened over the last 2 decades to stop all of that? Of course, we had the video rental market, and obviously I'm talking UK and Ireland here, but I myself, in my collection, have quite a few of these films on ex-rental VHS tapes. A Better Tomorrow, Hard Boiled, The Killer, Mad Mission, and Legend of the Golden Pearl immediately spring to mind. So these were their original introduction to Hong Kong film fans of the 1980s and early 90s. Then by the mid-1990s, we had retail labels like Made in Hong Kong, Eastern Heroes and Hong Kong Classics, or MIA, pumping them out left, right and centre, and more often than not in their original language with English subtitles and extra footage. From Bullet in the Head to Once a Thief, A Better Tomorrow 2 and 3 to Full Contact, A Chinese Ghost Story, City on Fire and many others, it was absolutely an amazing time to be an Asian film fan. Now, once that video market had died down and the labels started slowing down their output, the DVD market slipped in around the early 2000s, with Hong Kong Legends taking over the mantle and reissuing digital restorations of many of those Golden Princess and Cinema City titles, with the likes of, say, Tartan Asia handling the DVD release of Hard Boiled once again. Of course, Dragon Dynasty soon followed up with their own releases of certain titles, and as I mentioned, it really doesn't seem like that long ago when a lot of these were so friggin' easy to get hold of. Now, many of them still are on eBay, for example, you've just got to look for them. But of course, now with Blu-ray and 4K taking over, everyone wants these films in their finest quality yet, and I totally get it. I mean, I already have some of these on Blu-ray, as I said, many from Nova Media, the South Korean label, some from the fan-made Hong Kong Rescue label, and many via German releases, usually from Cargo Movies. And while a lot of these may not be legit to some degree, they still look good and I still have them in my collection. For example, I have a total of 9 versions of Hard Boiled in my collection across all forms of media, 2 of which are Blu-ray. So am I really excited for these future releases? Well, probably not as much as everyone else, but of course I'm not going to miss the chance to upgrade this amazing film one more time. Or possibly 2 more times. But I guess my point is, I'm still trying to figure out why this is such a big deal. We've been handed these movies, the bigger hits of Golden Princess and Cinema City, on a silver platter many times over the last few decades, yet I see posts on social media, etc. by people who talk like they have never seen the light of day. The majority of their biggest hits have always been there, available to us throughout the years in many different ways, and that's why, as I mentioned in my last podcast, I'm kind of a little more excited for the lesser known titles than I am for the John Woo and Choi Hark heavy hitters. Regardless, getting any of these movies in their finest form is always a blessing, and I'm still trying to work out if I can afford to buy both versions when they come out, and do I really need to? So last week we saw the UK Blu-ray release of Lam Nai Choi's notorious Category 3 rape and revenge thriller, Her Vengeance, from 88 Films. Now of course the film had been released in North America 2 or 3 months beforehand by Vinegar Syndrome as part of a double release with The Wild Devil Fetus, which is odd in itself as they really don't have much of a connection except for the sex and violence to some degree. I also wasn't too impressed with their artwork, to be honest, so I held back from buying it in knowing that 88 Films were going to be doing single releases for both. And I'm glad that I did, because their deluxe limited edition Blu-ray release of Her Vengeance, which is short on extras but features some absolutely gorgeous new artwork by Chris Barnes, which really sells the film for what it is, was well worth the wait. It looks amazing, both in design and picture quality, and I've definitely got a new favourite Lam Nai Choi film thanks to it. Of course, Devil Fetus, which has nothing to do with that particular director, is due for release at the end of August. However though, a week after that, if 88 can stick to schedule, we will see the deluxe limited edition Blu-ray release of Lam Nai Choi's final directorial effort, The Cat, which I really can't wait for. But before I get chatting about that little oddity, I wanted to take a look back at Lam Nai Choi's career, and mainly as a director. Of course, as most of you know, Lam started off in the industry as a cinematographer and DOP, going on to capture Shaw Brothers films like The Drug Connection, Judgment of an Assassin, The Proud Youth, Avenging Eagle, The Kung Fu Instructor, To Kill a Mastermind, and Revenge of the Corpse, to name but a few, as well as a number of his own works, of course. But I've always found him to be a very overlooked, almost a forgotten name among the more popular A-list directors of Hong Kong cinema. I mean, even that is weird in itself, considering how many memorable and highly regarded titles of his that have become cult classics in their own right. So back in 1981, the Shaw Brothers had give him the chance to make his directorial debut, albeit alongside the great Danny Lee, who already had a strong decade behind him working for the studio. Regardless, both got the chance to show their worth with One Way Only, a drama about a motorbike workshop owner who gets injured during an illegal race, but still continues to partake, which comes with its own set of problems via injury and the law. Danny Lee co-stars with Robert Mack in this coming-of-age racing film, which was co-written by Wong Jing, and it clearly impressed enough to set both men off on a path as film directors. Lam would also double up as the film's cinematographer, which allows for some great visuals, and the film itself reminded me of the likes of Andy Lau's On the Wrong Track, Leslie Cheung's Energetic 21 from around this period, as well as later flicks like Jackie Cheung's Off Track, Andy Lau's Full Throttle, and even Legend of Speed with Ekin Cheng, which came about almost 2 decades later. The following year, Lam Nai Choi would step up to the mark to deliver his own directorial piece with the hard-hitting and mostly overlooked Brothers from the Walled City, starring the amazing Chin Soo-ho, Philip Ko-fei, Johnny Wang Long-wei, and Wong Ching, who would also serve as one of the film's main fight choreographers. Falling under the Shaw Brothers banner once again, the film was set almost completely in the famed and now demolished Kowloon Walled City, and it's a pretty intense watch overall. A story of 2 brothers who choose different paths in life. It's nothing too original by today's standards, but its blend of drama, comedy, and brutal violence lets us see where Lam wanted to go. Now once again, he also shoots it beautifully, and I hope someday that we see this film finally get a restored Blu-ray release for all Lam fans to enjoy. So, clearly realising that Lam had something to offer, Shaw Brothers immediately got him onto his next project, which was the much-loved and equally dark Men from the Gutter. This time, the great Jason Pai Pao takes the lead, along with Wang Yong, Lo Meng, and a young Michael Moy co-starring, but we also get to enjoy the likes of his usual assistant director, Park Min Wong, Lee Hoi Sang, Sherman Wong, Billy Lau, San Kwai, and Yuen Wah and Yuen Bun, who also serve as the action directors. Again, it's a dark movie, gritty, bloody, and exciting, and perhaps Lam's first real big hit, and still today is with many fans of Hong Kong cinema around the world. Interestingly though, and even though Men from the Gutter was such a fine example of his work as a serious director, Lam's next movie for Shaw Brothers would be the crime comedy Three Stooges Go Undercover, starring Nat Chan, Kara Hoi, Stanley Fung, Shek Ken, and Michael Chan Wai Man, which was based on a script by Wong Jing. Now while it wasn't quite as impressive as before, it still has its moments and plenty to enjoy. Regardless, Lam stuck with the comedy genre for his next project, bringing in a bit of ghostly fun to the mix with The Ghost Snatchers in 1986, his first movie for Golden Harvest. This time, Wong Jing stars as the lead, along with Joey Wong, Stanley Fung, Michael Chan Wai-man, and the wonderful Joyce Godenzi, future wife of Sammo Hung and starlet of She Shoot Straight, License to Steal, Eastern Heroes, and more. Thankfully though, this showed that Lam could handle comedy direction perfectly fine and is a very fun watch overall. So from here until the end of his career, Lam Nai Choi would make the rest of his movies under the Golden Harvest banner, with Raymond Chow giving him a bit more freedom and budget to go wild. So following Ghost Snatchers and also in 1986, Lam gave the world his first truly bonkers movie, The Seventh Curse. And for those of you who have been living under a rock, The Seventh Curse is a movie that, even today, is still considered to be one of the nuttiest horror, comedy, action-adventure Cat 3 titles of its time. Based on the fictional character of Wisely, as written by the late Ni Kwong, whose adventures can also be seen in films such as The Legend of the Golden Pearl, aka The Legend of Wisely, Bury Me High with Moon Lee, Lam Nai Choi's own final film, The Cat, and Andy Lau's sci-fi flick, The Wesley's Mysterious Files, as well as many others. Now, this movie was written by Wong Jing once again and features a solid cast of Hong Kong stars, such as the handsome Chin Soo-ho, who had starred for him in Brothers from the Walled City, Powerhouse Dick Wei, the lovely Maggie Cheung, Elvis Choi, Sybil Hu, and the amazing Chow Yun-fat as Wisely himself, hot off the success from A Better Tomorrow and only one of his 11 movies from 1986. The film let Lam Nai Choi show viewers just how wild he could go and, although not perfect, still has a strong fan base today for this crazy film. I just love it. I mean, it is mental, but I love it. And for anyone that is interested, a few years ago, 88 Films did release a gorgeous deluxe edition Blu-ray that is absolutely totally worth picking up. In North America, Vinegar Syndrome put it out as a double pack with Chow Yun-fat's Witch from Nepal. Either way, The Seventh Curse is one of those films you need to see to believe, but you'll certainly not be disappointed. Now, Lam would have Chin Soo-ho stick around for his next venture, a 1987 gambling action movie called Killer's Nocturne. It's a very, very different kind of movie to The Seventh Curse, like a gangster period piece that also stars Alex Mann, Pat Ha, Patrick Shea, Alex To, Xing Fuan, Boro Young makes an appearance, and Jackie Chan's stunt team member Chris Lee, who also handles the action choreography. Now, the film plays like a revenge flick for the second half, but even with the gambling gangster element, runs at a bit of a slower pace in comparison to the madness that was The Seventh Curse. Now, saying that, there's plenty of gratuitous violence, and you get the chance to see Chin Soo-ho get the shit kicked out of him by a kangaroo. Yes, a real kangaroo. It's a wee bit mental, it's not his most perfect movie, but it's still worth seeing in my eyes. Of course, following that, Lam Nai Choi brought us the aforementioned Cat 3 classic, Her Vengeance, of which I previously mentioned just had a gorgeous Blu-ray release, courtesy of 88 Films. This was such a fantastic film, I mean in the grimmest of ways of course, and as simple as the plotline is, Lam brings his usual flair to it that then takes this typical rape and revenge flick up a notch. Pauline Wong leads the way and does an incredible job as the unfortunate victim turned vengeful heroine, encouraged, saved and trained by an old triad boss in a wheelchair, played by the great late Lam Chin Ying. The release comes with two versions of the film, one being the shorter uncut violent Cat 3 version and the, ironically, longer cut version where the violence is trimmed down but additional scenes help to flesh out the story. Both are well worth watching and just as gripping in their own way, but overall it was such a fabulous release and to me probably one of his best made titles if I'm to be honest. So already from straight-laced action dramas for Shaw Brothers to a couple of comedies, insane horror to dark thrillers, I guess at this stage critics and fans were at a dead end in guessing what direction Lam Nai Choi was going to go. Still at Golden Harvest of course, producers Raymond Choi, Leonard Ho and Choi Lam secured his services to direct the very fun and pretty underrated Yuen Biao action fantasy The Peacock King, a Japanese co-production based on a popular manga that saw two magical martial monks take on the King of Hell. Now, I really enjoy this movie, and my fingers are crossed that 88 Films will be putting this out on Blu-ray pretty damn soon. And with that, it would be cool if they added both versions of the film, as the Japanese version also offers about 12 additional minutes and extended scenes missing from the Hong Kong print. Not only that, but you have a great cast joining Yuen Biao, such as Gloria Yip, Eddie Ko, Gordon Liu, Kara Hui, Philip Kwok, Yuen Bun, Japanese star Mikami Hiroshi, and Pauline Wong, who returns after starring in Her Vengeance. Now, much like with The Seventh Curse, Nai Choi makes this an effects-filled extravaganza, and even more so given its comic book elements, while action directors Stephen Tong Wai and Philip Kwok deliver some pretty exciting choreography. But yes, I really hope that this is due for a Blu-ray release, alongside its pretty wild sequel, Saga of the Phoenix, which also came out in 1989. Now, while it's not as clean and seemingly as big budgeted than the first, this rush job still has enough going on to make it worth checking out. Yuen Biao is fantastic as always, of course, but his Japanese co-star has now been replaced, Gloria Yip returns, and there's definitely a bigger Japanese cast overall than Hong Kong stars this time around. Yuen Bun takes over action duties, and there's even more wild effects work, but it just didn't seem to be as popular as the first. Still, put out alongside the Peacock Keen on Blue would be a very welcome addition. So, sticking with flowing ghostly ladies, Lam Nai Choi glided into 1990 with the beautiful and fun erotic ghost story, the first of a trilogy, although this would be the only one he handled. Doubling up as the cinematographer, Lam delivers yet another one of his finest titles, and one that has recently seen Blu-ray releases from the likes of 88 Films, Shout Factory, Imprint, and God only knows who else. It's a great film and a very fun trilogy, hardly Oscar winning, but it entertains, and that's the main point. Big bosom babe Amy Yip leads the way at a time when sex, ghosts, kung fu and comedy were a dime a dozen. Of course, after directing those two comic book movies with the Peacock Keen, this would thrust him back into Category 3 territory, which he seemed to do so well in. Although it would be about 2 more years before we would get his next offering, the Cat 3 cult classic, Story of Ricky. Now, let's be honest, does a movie such as this need an introduction? Any true fan of Hong Kong cinema has seen, or at least knows about, the Story of Ricky, whether it's via the countless DVD and Blu-ray releases we've had over the last number of years, or via clips on YouTube of its more outrageous moments. Everyone pretty knows about this hyper-violent manga adaptation. Now, Peacock Keen starlet Gloria Yip joins the gorgeous and muscle-bound Fan Su Wong, who stars as our hero Ricky. Locked up in a dangerous prison run by a sadistic warden who is played by Fan Su Wong's actual father, Fan Mei Sheng, Ricky pretty much fights for his life on a daily basis, which leads to some of the most brutal showdowns ever filmed, at least for this time period, which are definitely the highlights of this otherwise slow-burning prison flick. Now, while I like the Story of Ricky, I've never loved it, but it does feature the awesome Yukari Oshima in a great villainess role. Philip Kwok also returns and doubles up again as the fight choreographer, but bar its cast and violent action, I've just always felt that Story of Ricky is missing something that made Lam Nai Choi's previous titles a wee bit more classy, creative and visually stunning, but that may just be down to the whole setting, of course. Anyway, Story of Ricky wasn't really a huge hit upon release and almost put a stop to Fan Su Wong's career, which was unfortunate, but it still remains his most famous role today. So yes, this was 1992 and Lam Nai Choi had one more title to offer before calling it a day. Now that title was, of course, The Cat, and as mentioned, the upcoming new 88 Films Blu-ray release, which I'm pretty excited for, is due out pretty soon. Also known as The 1000 Years Cat, this sci-fi action adventure falls under the Wisely catalogue and sees Gloria Yip return once again. This time, a Better Tomorrow star, Wace Lee, plays the role of Wisely, which was a strange choice, I've always thought, with the likes of Lau Su-ming, Lawrence Lau, Christine Ng, and fight choreographer Philip Kwok co-starring. We also see an appearance from Wisely creator Ni Kwang and producer Choi Lam. Now, while the script is pretty thin and production values seem low, and the cast is questionable for the most part, the cat still entertains with its wild action that pretty much sees the alien cat in question have a kung fu fight with a dog. I mean, it's a bizarre ride and probably a career-ending low point for Lam Nai Choi, but I really hope that this upcoming Blu-ray release from 88 Films will help it find some new love with today's fans. And that's pretty much Lam Nai Choi in a nutshell. 13 movies over 11 years. Such a mix of genres and a filmography that is still overshadowed by his contemporaries, yet he left so much that is still talked about today. I do believe he retired from the industry to focus on his love for travel and photography, but I would love to have seen him do much more before then. It's crazy to think, but he should have a much stronger fan base at this stage if I'm to be honest. Part Ed Wood, but all Lam Nai Choi. It's fair to say that this Hong Kong filmmaker has delivered some pretty interesting works throughout the course of his short-lived career, and while far from perfect, you can't deny that the most of them have definitely stuck out among the hundreds and hundreds of titles loved by fans of Hong Kong's golden years. Okay, slightly off track for this one, but because it was only let slip this week, I cannot express just how friggin' excited I am that 88 Films are going to be releasing Yuen Biao's fantastic action comedy, Rosa, on Blu-ray later this year. What a great surprise, and I only watched my DVD copy of this a few days before, wishing to myself that it would see the light of day here on Blu-ray in the UK. Now, if you haven't seen Rosa or know what it's about, this is a 1986 Hong Kong action comedy about two daft young cops on their first big case. The film was produced by Sammo Hung under his Boho Films and the Golden Harvest banner, and was co-written by the one and only Wong Kar-wai. Now, in the grand scheme of things, it's a pretty simple piece, but it entertains, and while many have complained that the comedy outweighs the action, I say, so what? Rosa is a product of its time, and from a time when Hong Kong cinema was just churning them out like there was no tomorrow. Now naturally, not every movie is going to be a police story or a hard-boiled, and we have to sometimes just take the mindless entertainment to enjoy and be able to switch off or to have a laugh. Now, Yuen Biao is partnered with comedy actor and composer Loel Low, with both of them being joined by stars such as the wonderful Kara Hui, Paul Chun, James Tian, Charlie Cho, Chung Fat, and the awesome Dick Wei, who gets one hell of a showdown with Biao in an epic closing battle, a scene that is worth the price of admission alone. Of course, many of the regular faces from any Sammo Hung production also pop up in there too, while Yuen Biao, Lam Ching Ying, and Yuen Wah handle the fantastic fight choreography. Please get it, you will not be disappointed. Anyway, I posted a picture of the release on my Instagram, and it definitely got quite a lot of people excited, and rightly so. But one comment popped up saying, "Wait till you see what other Yuen Biao films are coming out this year," with a wee emoji wink beside it. And that got me thinking, just what other Yuen Biao titles could we possibly be getting? Now, as much as he had been playing stuntman and bit player since the early 1970s in productions such as 14 Amazons, Hapkido, Jackie's very own Cub Tiger from Kwantong, Enter the Dragon, When Taekwondo Strikes, Secret Rivals 1 and 2, Hand of Death, Vengeful Beauty, Broken Oath, and many of Sammo Hung's earlies including Enter the Fat Dragon, Dirty Tiger Crazy Frog, and Warriors 2, Yuen Biao never really got thrust to leading man status until around 1979 when Sammo co-starred and directed him in the fantastic Knockabout, a kung fu comedy that I adore and that Eureka has already put out on Blu-ray, so we know it won't be that one. Now with that said, we know they've also put out the likes of The Champions, which was also a damn surprise and treat to get, Zoo Warriors, Dreadnought, and his epic Prodigal Son along with Warriors 2, and obviously most of the films he stars in with Jackie Chan and Sammo Hung. Now equally, 88 Films have given us a few Yuen Biao titles before this, such as Righting Wrongs, On the Run, Hero, and The Iceman Cometh, but we still have a good number of solid Yuen Biao vehicles that deserve to be restored and released. Of course, as I mentioned previously in my bit about Lam Nai Choi, we have the Peacock Keen and its sequel, Saga of the Phoenix, which my fingers are crossed for, but I'm really hoping that we get his self-directed and very fun flick, A Kid from Tibet, a 1992 film that has elements of The Iceman Cometh and sees Biao play a fast-kicking monk who goes up against evil sorcerers Yuen Biao and Nina Li Chi. It also features a blink and you'll miss him cameo of Jackie Chan, but overall, it's a fantastic film that just never has had the love it deserves, and the fight scenes are friggin' awesome, as you would expect. I'd also love to see Shanghai Shanghai, Yuen Biao vs Sammo Hung, with Anita Mui and George Lam co-starring. The film was directed by Teddy Robin Kwan, who also starred in and directed The Legend of the Golden Pearl, and it carries some similar adventure vibes to that, along with splashes of Miracles and Boxer from Shantung. It's a very fun movie that's often forgotten about, not perfect, but definitely one worth putting out there, especially for the Corey Yuen Kwai directed fight scenes. And talking about forgotten, my fingers are well and truly tightly crossed in the hope that we get the very fun and bonkers License to Steal, produced by Sammo Hung, directed by Billy Chan, and featuring some incredible fight scenes by Keen Lee. It's really a Joyce Godenzi movie and her follow-up to She Shoots Straight, but Yuen Biao is brilliant in this as a nutcase who lives his life thinking he is a heroic swordsman from the wuxia era. The comedy is typically wacky from this period, but the fights are awesome. Colin Chow, Richard Ng and Billy Chow co-star, while Corey Yuen and Sammo cameo. Interestingly though, the film falls under the Golden Princess banner, and I know there's always been a rights issue with it, but either way, I hope this film falls into the hands of Idiot Films soon enough. Now, around the early to mid 1990s, Yuen Biao made a few titles under director and Hong Kong movie legend Wu Ma, who would often co-star alongside him at the same time. Now, these films were Picture of a Nymph, kind of a remake of a Chinese ghost story that also stars Joey Wong and Wu Ma himself, both of whom starred in Choi Hark's original film. It's actually not a terrible movie, just not as classy as the original, but Yuen Biao shines and does deliver some great fight scenes from what I can remember. Then there's the awesome Kickboxer, which is probably the best of the three Wu Ma directed films, and sees Yuen Biao back as Biao's main nemesis, as well as co-starring the great Yan Shi-kwan. Now this film I have high hopes for actually. I can't wait to see it uncut, widescreen, in its original language, and obviously cleaned up. The film has also been known as Once Upon a Time in China 6 and Once Upon a Chinese Hero, but it is definitely one of my favourite solo Yuen Biao outings, with the man himself directing and delivering some incredible fight scenes. And finally, there is their last film together with Wu as director, which is the disappointing Circus Kids, a film that really should have been incredible considering the years of experience Wu Ma has behind him, and also down to having incredibly talented super kickers such as Yuen Biao, Donnie Yen and Ken Lo on board. Instead, we get a cheaply produced piece featuring Bay Logan as a bad guy with uninspiring cinematography and acting that results as an average martial arts adventure. I mean, I'll be honest, if it was still to come to Blu-ray, I'd be pretty excited as it does have some fun fight moments, but there's just better out there. So, in between Kickboxer and Circus Kids, Yuen Biao starred in two wuxia flicks that I would really love to see get upgrades. The first is The Sword Stained with Royal Blood, a remake of the Shaw Brothers classic from Changche. This time, Larry Chung directs, the same man behind Charlotte Chung Man's horror film Devil's Vendetta and the 2010 horror flick Virtual Recall with Stephen Fung. So he hasn't done much as a director, but I really enjoyed what he did with this one. Of course, he had Yuen Biao in the lead and a massive cast in the shape of Charlotte Chung Man, Danny Lee, Ng Man Tat, Anita Yuen, Elvis Choi, Wu Ma, Pauline Wong, Melvin Wong, and so many others. Again, it's not perfect, but it definitely has its moments, and Brandy Yuen delivers some pretty cool action scenes. The second wuxia title is the very fun and very forgotten Deadful Melody, sometimes known as Dreadful Melody, but it is a wildly fun movie nonetheless. Now this was directed by Eun Min Kan, another short-lived director who also did Wu Ma's Ghost Legend and Lam Chin Ying's Spiritual Trinity, both of which were good fun, but he also worked as the assistant director on films such as Heart of the Dragon, Millionaire's Express, Dragons Forever and Pedicab Driver, for example, as well as acting in and serving as the action director of many others. But I've always really enjoyed Deadful Melody, featuring Yuen Biao, Bridget Lin, Karina Lau, Elvis Choi, Wu Ma, Lam Wai, Peter Chan and Chung Fat, with Meng Hoi and Keen Lee delivering some very exciting wuxia action. If you want to know more, head over to the Invincible Asia website and you can read my full review on this movie. And then there's Shogun in Little Kitchen. Now, I think that this was put out on video by Eastern Heroes back in the 1990s. I know Choi Hark's Chinese Feast was, but I'm not too sure. Regardless, I totally missed it if it had been, and I've been dying to get my hands on it ever since. The film was directed by the great Ronnie Yu, obviously the man behind The Bride with White Hair, Postman Fights Back, Legacy of Rage, China White and Jet Li's Fearless, for example. And while this is definitely more of a cooking comedy, made well before Chow Sing-chi gave us God of Cookery, it's still one I really want to see out there. Yuen Biao leads the way, of course, alongside Leon Lai and Eun Man Tat, with legends like Jimmy Wang Yu and Lung Gar-yan making cameos, and Yoon Chung-yan handling whatever action is on offer. So please, let's go 88 films with this one. And then there is the very little seen 1992 action drama The Setting Sun, an international co-production that sees Yuen Biao star as a mafia boss, alongside prolific Japanese star Masaya Kaito from Drive and Shinjuku Incident, as well as Hollywood powerhouses Donald Sutherland and Diane Lane. There's actually quite a massive Japanese cast throughout, and I guess considering its plot of a wartime setting, that explains it, while Yuen Biao and his stunt team handle the fight action. I don't even think this film has ever been available in the UK. I know it did get a DVD release in the US, so I'd love to see it finally get put out there. Now, before I end up going through this incredible and underrated Hong Kong legend's full filmography, I'll just note a few more titles I think would be worth getting put out on Blu-ray, even the few that aren't just so perfect. And those few imperfect ones would be the likes of Tough Beauty and the Sloppy Slop, the cheaply produced 1995 remake of Police Story 3 Super Cop from Yuen Bun and Alan Choi that stars Yuen Biao and Cynthia Khan with Yuen Wah, Billy Chow and Wes Lee. Cheap it is, but I still enjoyed it. Again, check out my full review on the website. There's also Hero of Swallow, again a cheaply produced martial arts adventure, kind of like Iron Monkey, although it comes across more like Iron Monkey 2, but as low grade as it is, Hero of Swallow still has some fun moments. And finally, the other lesser Yuen Biao flick, although to me he does an incredible job in this, is The Hunted Hunter, a Hong Kong production made in the Philippines, obviously due to its low budget, starring Yuen Biao as a security guard convicted of murder and going on the run. Now, I have this on VCD and was really surprised how much I enjoyed it when I first saw it. Yuen Biao is brilliant, and it's a shame that it didn't get a bit more love on its original release. The film is directed by Ricky Lau, the guy behind Mr. Vampire of course, and would mark an 11-year gap since he last directed Yuen Biao in Mr. Vampire Part 2. And I feel he does a pretty good job here, even with a much lower budgeted production. Yuen Bun handles the fight action and delivers some pretty damn exciting moments, some in slow motion, but they all allow Yuen Biao to show his talents for sure. The only negative is probably the Filipino actors, but it's a slight negative in the grand scheme of things, and I think if this was to get a restored Blu-ray release, that The Hunted Hunter would finally get the love it deserves. Anyway, that's my thoughts on what Yuen Biao titles may be coming after the release of Rosa, and let's be honest, any chance to see Yuen Biao in action is going to be welcomed with open arms. So fingers crossed, 88 Films keep surprising us with much more in the near future. And finally, what's the new releases for the month ahead? Well, talking about idiot films, we have some absolute crackers coming out in August 2025, the first of which is the aforementioned Devil Fetus, the 1983 twisted, effects-filled, low-way produced horror that is as mad as it sounds. It's not amazing, but it's definitely a lot of fun and typical of this time period in regards to its special effects and production quality. Of course, I also mentioned about Lam Nai Choi's The Cat, which is around the same time, and finally the 4K UHD release of Keen Hu's classic Come Drink With Me. Now, Idiot did release this on Blu-ray a few years ago, so we'll no doubt get a host of archival features on there, but also some new audio commentaries, etc. And obviously, the chance to see this classic wuxia film, the best it's ever looked, and the gorgeous Cheng Pei Pei in full 4K. Actually, while she's on my mind, you should go and check out my episode of Heroes of the East that features my full retrospective on this amazing woman. Now, from Eureka Video, we get their next set of Shaw Brothers films under the title of Martial Law, Lo Wei's Martial World. 3 films from director Lo Wei that include The Black Butterfly, Death Valley, and Vengeance of a Snow Girl, the last of which I am definitely pretty excited for. These all range from the late 60s into the early 70s, so you kind of know what to expect. Of course, these will come with new audio commentary tracks and such, and is actually the only Asian movie release for Eureka this month. Over at Radiance Films, they're giving us the fantastic second box set of Shinobi no Mono films starring the great late Raizo Ichikawa. You can head over to my website to check out my full review and breakdown of that release, and Shout Factory are finally putting out the first title of their Golden Princess catalogue, which is Ringo Lam's fantastic City on Fire, starring Chow Yun-fat and Danny Lee. But like I say, I still don't know if I'm going to go for these or wait for Arrow to release theirs. Oh, first world problems, eh? Apart from that, a relatively quiet month for releases, which my wallet is pretty happy about. But anyway, if you've made it this far, congratulations. I'm George Clark, and this has been another Invincible Asia podcast. Thanks for listening, and thank you again for your continued support. It really is greatly appreciated. Until next time though, enjoy your Kung Fu, and I'll see you soon. So thank you once again for watching another video here on Invincible Asia. Don't forget you can check out hundreds of others here on the channel. You can also show your continued support by heading over to my new merch store or by checking out invincibleasia.com, where you can read my full movie reviews and follow me on Instagram at InvincibleAsia. Until next time though, enjoy your Kung Fu, and I will see you soon.